Okay, friends.
Thank you, Madhav.
Friends.
Madhav made two insulting remarks about me. One knowingly, which I'll come to.
Tension mat.
The other probably unwittingly. He mentioned the Doon school. That I think no one should be blamed for the school they were sent to. In my particular case, that was the only decision in my life
Audience.
that was taken from me. I'm happy to own my college, the place I did my PhD, my publishers, my friends, my enemies, but don't blame my school on me. So that's the insulting remark he made unwittingly. But he also insulted me knowingly when he said that if the proceedings had been in Marathi, Ramchandra Guha and Nandan Nilekani would not have known what to say. I can't speak for Nandan. He has to answer, among other things, to his fluently Marathi-speaking wife, but he can take care of that. What he would have said, if he had to speak in Marathi, he may answer, but I would have said simply, Gavaskar, Tendulkar, Umbrikar, Subhash Gupte, Vijay Mandarikar. And I would not have stopped there. Most of you, any of you know me or know my country, know that I am fond of cricket. You don't have to be Maharashtrian to know that the greatest batsmen, not always the greatest bowlers, come from Mumbai and Maharashtra. But very few here know that my real passion is not cricket, but Hindustani classical music. So if Madhav had asked me to speak in Marathi, I would have said Kishori Amonkar, Mogubai Kotikar, Kesarbai Kerkar, Ina Sahasrabudhe, Padma Talwalkar, Jayant Lele, but I would have left out one name because Bhimsen Joshi is a Kannadi guy, don't forget that. But I'm not here to speak about either of my passions. I'm here to speak about the history of India. And even there my Marathi does not let me down. Because it's my considered view as a historian that with the exception of Gandhi, Nehru and Tagore, all that is most influential in our modern history originated in Maharashtra. So I would have said Gokhale, Ranade, Agarkar, Ambedkar, Tarabai, Shinde, Karve, and I would have got away with that too. So next time come and ask me to speak in Marathi. I thought long and hard about what I could speak about. We are here to honor the life and the work of an extraordinary figure. And I thought I'd try something more personal. Comrade Chavan is in theory a Marxist. I spent many years studying Marx. And one of the hallmarks of Marx or Marxists is that they tend to discount the value of the individual. Now, whether this is out of a kind of belief that social aggregates like classes move history, whether it is in Comrade Chaban's case out of a deep and unself-conscious modesty and integrity, the fact is that in my country and in my profession, the worth of individuals is discounted. Marxists don't appreciate the contribution of individuals because they are taught that individuals don't really count. Now, the dominant religion in India is Hinduism. And if you are a Hindu, you don't memorialize or pay tribute to or honor the lived life. Because no sooner is a person dead than he's reborn as something or something else. But this is quite different to the Christian tradition, for example, where or even the Islamic tradition, where the lived life is examined, honored, celebrated. And there is no real biographical tradition in our country, in my view, because of this peculiar conjunction between Marxism and Hinduism. In a strange way, those normally opposed forces meet. Now, I've tried to resist that, because I've always been fascinated by individuals and the ways in which they make and unmake history. And I thought that I would pay my tribute to Comrade Chaman by recalling the lives of some extraordinary Indian individuals I have either known personally or through the course of my scholarly research. And the first person I want to recall in this kind of narrative of remarkable, exemplary, half-forgotten lives was a resident of this city. Earlier today, I was having lunch with a friend who lives on a road named after him. But that's about the only recognition he has. He was a considerable figure. And I got interested in him because through him, my twin interests in social history and cricket came together. Many years ago, I thought I'd write a book on what was India's first major cricketing tournament. The great-great-grandfather of the Indian Premier League, if you will. It was known as originally it was called the Triangular. It was played, originally it was known simply as the Presidency match. It was played between the Parsis and the Europeans. Then it became the Triangular when the Hindus were added on. Then it became a Quadrangular because the British believed in defining people by community, so the Muslims had a team. That still left a problem because not all people living in India were Parsi or Hindu or Muslim or European. So in 1935, that tournament finally became five-cornered. It was called the Pentangular with the addition of a fifth team with the magisterial name The Rest. And the rest included Indian Christians. The great Vijay Samuel Hazare, one of Maharashtra's greatest ever batsmen, was a Christian, but he could not play for the Europeans because he was not white. It included Jews, interestingly. An ancestor of the poet Nizam Ezekiel, one of the great Mumbaikar, played for the rest. So I was very intrigued by this tournament, and I wanted to write a history of the tournament from the cricketing point of view. And I was looking at some old microfilms trying to trace the records, who were the great batsmen, who were the great bowlers, what were the major contests, how did the Europeans finally lose their supremacy and so on. And I was looking at a microfilm for the year 1913. And the parallels with the current newspapers are quite extraordinary. Cricket was certainly the obsession of the middle class of Mumbai in 1913 as it is in 2011. And the newspapers were discussing the selections. The captain of the Hindu team had just been chosen. His name was M.D. Pai, which means from his name he came not far from the town of Nilekani, closer to the coast than where Nandan is on top of the hill more or less. Pai is mostly near the coast. And M.D. Pai had travelled up the coast, or his ancestors had travelled up the west coast to settle in Mumbai. The M.D. Pai was chosen captain of the Hindu team, and he was given a felicitation by his caste community, the Gaud Saraswats. So it was, shall we say, a very different kind of function to the one we are holding today, which is totally inclusive. But we should not be too judgmental about how Indian society was in 1913. It was then parceled off into caste and community. So the Gaud Saraswats threw a party to honor the fact that one of their men had been chosen captain of the Hindu team. And I was reading the account in a Bombay newspaper, the Bombay Chronicle, of the Gaud Saraswat felicitation of M.D. Pai. And in that report I found something incredibly curious. The report said that in thanking his community for throwing this felicitation for him, Mr. Pai wanted to say that he did not deserve to be captain of the Hindu team. The honour should have gone to Mr. Palwankar Balu, who was a better cricketer than him. Now, can any of you recall reading an interview with Mahendra Singh Dhoni which said Virendra Sehwag should be captain instead of him? Or Saurabh Ganguly saying that Rahul Dravid should have been captain instead of him? Now, no cricketer would say this. Now, this really intrigued me. And I said, why has he made this remark? And I probed a little deeper, and I found the answer. There were two reasons why Mr. Balu could not be made captain of the Hindu team, even though he was a far greater cricketer than M.D. Pai.